Wyoming Territory, July 1883, the train screamed across the high plains, steam hissing like a warning, but Thea Granger did not look back. Her gloved hands clutched the carpet bag on her lap, the one her mother had packed before telling her that she was no longer welcome at home. "You chose shame," her father had said. "Do not write, do not return," she had not cried then. She did not now. Outside the window, the dusty land stretched forever burnt gold under a sky too wide to hold on to. Somewhere out there, a man waited. A man who had read her letters, seen her photograph, and sent passage. She had been a schoolteacher in Ohio. 23, unmarried, and worse, she had loved the wrong man, a man her family disapproved of. When the child was lost before it ever had a name, her family's disappointment turned to disgust. So she answered an ad in the back of a newspaper. A lonely rancher in the Wyoming Territory seeking a wife of strong character and quiet nature. No dowry required. Hard work expected. Thea had written back, plain-spoken and honest. She did not want to be anybody's charity. She wanted a place to belong, a place to be useful. She had no illusions about romance, but she had not expected him to write back with kindness, or to say he saw something strong in her words. Now the train hissed to a stop in a place called Wind Hollow, barely more than a platform and a wind-worn depot. She stepped down, boots meeting dry earth, sun hot on her shoulders. A man stood beside a lean buckboard, dust on his hat and shirt, hands at his hips. He was tall, with quiet eyes the color of riverbed stone. His face looked like it had seen more sky than roof. He tipped his hat. "Are you Miss Thea Granger?" "Yes," she said, her voice steady. "Ira Prescott," he said. "You are right on time." She nodded. "I have no other place to be." Ira studied her for a moment, not her dress or her face, but her eyes. She did not look away. "Let's get you home then," he said. The ride was long and quiet, the wagon creaking as they moved across grassland that looked untouched by time. The wind carried the scent of sage and dust. Thea sat beside him, her carpet bag on her lap. "You ever been west before?" he asked. "No," she said, "but I do not scare easy." He glanced at her then, just once. "Good." The ranch was a modest spread tucked into a shallow valley with a barn, a corral, and a house of weathered wood that leaned a little to one side. 2 horses grazed nearby and smoke curled from the chimney. Ira helped her down. "I figured you would want your own room for now. You can decide later what you want." "Thank you," she said, her voice catching. No man had ever said that to her. What she wanted had never mattered. Inside, the house was simple. Wood stove, worn quilts, clean, lived in. He showed her to a small room at the back with a narrow bed and a washstand. "There is water in the basin," he said, "and supper will be ready soon." She turned to him. "Why me?" He met her eyes. "Because you tell the truth, and because when I saw your photo you looked like someone who would not break." She swallowed hard, not knowing what to say. That night they ate stew at the kitchen table. It was quiet but not uncomfortable. She noticed the way he passed her the bread before serving himself, the way he listened when she spoke, even when her voice was small. "I will earn my keep," she said suddenly. "I do not doubt it," he said. The next morning, Thea rose with the light and went out to the barn. She milked the goat, fed the chickens, and swept the porch without being asked. When Ira stepped outside, he watched her for a moment. "You do not have to do everything on the first day," he said. "I would rather be useful," she said. "It helps," he nodded. "We have fencing to mend this week. If you can handle a hammer, I will show you." She followed him into the field where the fence had fallen in 2 places. He showed her how to brace the post, how to drive the nails without splitting the wood. She worked beside him all morning, sweat streaking her back, her palms blistered. At one point he passed her a canteen. "You do not stop, do you?" She drank, then looked at him. "If I stop, I start thinking." His jaw tightened a little. "You do not talk much about what happened." "There is not much to say," she said. "I loved someone who did not love me back. My family hated me for it. I lost everything except my name." He looked at her then. "You did not lose yourself." That night she stood at the back porch watching the stars blink into view. Ira came to stand beside her, his arms crossed. I built this house when I was 22, he said. My father died sudden. I had to take over everything, never had time for anything else. She glanced at him. You never married? No, most of the women out here, they wanted a man who smiled more. She smiled a little at that. I am not afraid of quiet. He looked down at her. I know, the days passed. She learned to ride, to read the weather by the sky, to make coffee over an open flame. Ira watched her without ever hovering. He taught her fence work, how to check the cattle, how to shoot steady. One evening, as they brought in the horses from the far pasture, a thunderstorm rolled in sudden and angry. Lightning cracked the sky open. Her horse reared at the noise and she lost her grip. She hit the ground hard, the breath knocked out of her. Before she could move, Ira was off his horse and kneeling beside her. Are you hurt? He asked, his hands on her shoulders. She gasped. Just winded. He helped her sit up, rain beginning to fall. You scared me, he said, his voice low. She looked at him, rain sliding down his face. I am not trying to. He brushed the wet hair from her face, his fingers rough but gentle. I know. They rode back in silence, soaked through. That night she dried her hair by the fire. Ira sat across from her, watching the flames. I never thought I would have someone here, he said. I never thought I would be wanted anywhere, she said. He stood up, walked over to her, and knelt down. You are wanted here. She looked into his eyes, saw no pity there, only truth. She reached out, her fingers resting against his chest. I am not broken, she said softly. I never thought you were, he said, and when he kissed her, it was not sudden. It was something that had been coming from the moment she stepped off that train, when he saw strength in her eyes instead of weakness. She kissed him back, not because she was grateful, but because she wanted to. Thea woke early, long before the sun had crested the hills, the room still dim and hushed. The quilt was warm, the air cool against her face. She could hear a rooster in the distance, and the creak of floorboards as Ira moved through the kitchen. She dressed quickly, pulling her shawl close, and stepped out into the morning. He was by the stove, stirring something in a cast iron pot. His sleeves were rolled up and his hair was still damp from washing. The kettle hissed gently beside him. You always start the day this early, she asked, voice rough from sleep. He glanced over. The stock doesn't wait. Thea set the table without being asked, folding the napkins and placing the tin cups just so. The rhythm of it soothed something in her. The clink of enamel plates, the way the wood grain caught the light small things that made the house feel solid. They ate without much talk, just the scrape of spoons and the soft knock of boots under the table. When the last of the coffee was gone, Ira pushed his chair back. Need to ride out to the North Ridge, he said. Had a calf go missing yesterday, might have gotten caught in the arroyo. Do you want help? He studied her face. Wouldn't ask if I didn't. She saddled her own horse, using the method he'd shown her the week before. Her fingers still bore faint scabs from the first time she'd tried on her own, but she'd learned not to let the cinch slip. They rode out side by side, the sun rising slow behind them. The ridge was farther than she expected, and the trail narrowed until brush scraped her boot. Ira reached ahead to move a low branch out of her way without a word. At the top, they dismounted and tied the horses to a wind-stunted juniper. Below, the land fell away into a shallow gully, dry now but bleached with the memory of spring floods. Tracks, he said, crouching. Small ones, fresh. Thea came beside him, peering down. Coyote, could be, or the calf wandered off on its own. They followed the prints until Ira stopped short and raised a hand. She froze behind him. Down in the brush, a pale shape shifted, ears flicking, legs tangled in barbed wire strung low across a broken fence line. Ira went first, slow and steady, his voice low and steady. Easy now, you're all right. Thea stayed just behind, her skirt catching on sage. She watched his hands as he approached the calf, steady, sure, never rushed. He knelt in the dirt and cut the wire with a folding knife he carried in his boot. Blood streaked the animal's leg, but not deep. The calf blinked at him, dazed but still breathing. Hold its head, he said to her. She didn't hesitate. She knelt, cradled the soft muzzle in her lap, and murmured nonsense. The calf's breath was fast and warm against her wrist. "It'll walk," Ira said, "but not far." They fashioned a sling from his coat and hers, looping it beneath the calf's belly. Together they carried it up the ridge, both of them red-faced and panting by the end. They worked without speaking. Thea didn't need words to know what he thought of her in that moment. Back at the barn, Ira cleaned the wound and wrapped it with muslin. Thea held the calf steady. When they were done, he leaned against the stall door, wiping sweat from his brow. "You did good," he said. "It wasn't much. It was more than most would have done." She sat on a hay bale, twisting her fingers in her lap. "I never thought I'd feel useful again." Ohio was full of polite people who looked through me like glass. He looked over at her. "You're not glass," she hesitated. "Do you regret bringing me here?" "No," he said. "Not once." That night she lingered by the fire after supper, darning a tear in one of his shirts. He sat across from her, oiling his saddle. They didn't speak at first. The fire popped and the wind whistled through the chinks in the wall. "Ira," she said, not looking up, "what was your mother like?" He paused, laying the cloth down. "Quiet, kind when she could be." "She had a hard life. Did she love this land?" "She did." Said the open sky gave her room to breathe. Thea nodded slowly. "I think I understand that now." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Do you miss home?" She didn't answer for a long time. Then, "I miss what I thought it was." They sat without speaking after that. When the fire burned low, he stood and held out his hand. She took it and he helped her to her feet. "I'll walk you to your room," he said. She didn't let go of his hand right away. "Ira," she said, "I'm not afraid to stay." He looked at her and his voice was quiet. "I know." When she turned in for the night, she lay wakeful under the quilt, the scent of juniper still on her skin. Outside the window, the wind shifted, and somewhere in the dark, a calf bleated softly in the barn. She closed her eyes. And for the first time in a long while, she felt like she belonged to something that would not turn her away. Thea stood at the edge of the corral, one boot propped against the lowest rail, watching the chestnut gelding circle slow and stiff-legged under Ira's lead. The animal's flank bore a fading welt, and its gait carried the memory of a bad fall. Ira worked patient, steady, never jerking the rope or raising his voice. Thea admired that about him his silence wasn't emptiness, it had weight. She shifted her stance, the sun warming her shoulders. Behind her, the wind stirred the tall grass and carried the smell of distant rain. "Would you ever sell him?" she asked after a while, nodding toward the gelding. Ira didn't look away from the horse. "Not yet, he's still trying." He let the rope slacken a little, letting the gelding come to a stop. It stood, blowing hard, foam flecking its bit. Ira walked to its side, ran a hand down its neck, then turned toward her. "You don't give up on things easy, do you?" she asked. "No," he said. "Not when they're still breathing." She met his eyes. "Me neither." He looped the rope over the rail. "You ever work with broken animals?" "No," she said. "Just broken people." He nodded once, then stepped closer. "Saddle's ready if you want to ride out with me." Fence line toward the draws washed out. "Could use another set of eyes." She fetched her horse, mounted without help, and followed him west, where the land dipped and folded in ways she hadn't seen before. The sky was heavy with clouds, but the air stayed dry. They rode in silence for a long stretch, their horses moving at an easy pace. A kestrel hovered over the ridge ahead, motionless on the wind. "You ever miss teaching?" Ira asked, eyes on the trail. Thea shifted in her saddle, reins loose in her hand. "Sometimes. Not the schoolhouse, but the moments when someone learned something real." "Not just from a book," he glanced at her. "You miss being needed." She gave a soft laugh, but it didn't hold humor. "I miss being more than tolerated." They rode on. The wind had picked up, dry and restless. At the edge of the draw, the fence had collapsed, posts leaning like old men, wire tangled in the brush. Ira dismounted and began pulling the loose strands free. Thea stepped beside him, holding the post steady as he drove it deeper into the earth. "You ever think about leaving this place?" she asked. "No," he said. "Even when it's hard, especially then." She looked at his hands, the way they tightened the wire without hesitation, then up at his face. I think I'm starting to understand why. They worked until the fence stood straight again. Ira stepped back, wiping his brow with his sleeve. Thea looked out across the land, where the sky touched the far ridges and the grass swayed in slow rhythm. I was always told I was too serious, she said. Too quiet, that no man would ever want a woman who didn't flatter or follow. He looked at her, eyes steady. That's foolish talk. She picked up a fallen branch, tossed it aside. Still, I believed it for a long time. I don't want someone who follows, he said. I want someone who stands beside me. She held his gaze. I can do that. He stepped close then, not sudden, not hesitant. His hand brushed hers, calloused fingers against the inside of her wrist. I know you can, he said. She didn't pull away. Ira, she said, voice low, when I came here, I didn't expect anything but shelter and work. I didn't expect to feel steady again. You are steady, he said. You always were. You just didn't have ground beneath you. The wind tugged strands of her hair loose, and he reached up to tuck them behind her ear. His touch was warm, not soft, but careful. You're not a guest here, he said. You're part of this place now. She stepped closer until the space between them quieted. Then I want to stay, not just in the house, not just on the land, with you. He didn't answer with words. He bent his head and kissed her, slow and certain, his hand at the small of her back. She leaned into him, not out of need, but choice. The sky darkened as they rode back, the first drops of rain falling just as the barn came into view. They stabled the horses in silence, moving with shared rhythm. Inside the house, she peeled off her damp coat and hung it by the stove. Ira poured water into the basin, washed the dirt from his hands, then turned to her. I'll clear a space in the wardrobe, he said. If you want it, she met his eyes. I do. He nodded once, and something in his face eased. That night, as the rain tapped soft against the roof, Thea folded her dresses into the empty drawer he'd cleared. She placed her hairbrush beside his on the washstand. No ceremony, no hesitation. When she turned, he was there in the doorway, watching her with a look that held no question, only welcome. She crossed the room and took his hand, leading him to the bed they would now share. The quilts were warm, the lamp low. Outside, the storm passed on, leaving the land washed clean and the air still. Inside, two people lay close, no longer waiting to be chosen, no longer wondering if they were enough. They were. Together. Late summer settled over the valley, slow and golden. Thea walked the edge of the garden rows with a basket on her hip, brushing her fingers across the leaves of the beans, checking for beetles. The sun hadn't climbed high yet, and the soil still held the night's cool. She crouched, pulled a few weeds, and straightened when she heard the gate creak behind her. Ira leaned against the post, his hat low over his brow. We got a letter, he said. She wiped her hands on her apron. From who? Name's Walter Dobbins. Owns a dry goods store over in Red Hill. Says he heard you used to teach. Thea rested the basket on the fence rail. That was a long ride for a letter. He said he's looking to build a schoolhouse, asked if I knew anyone with sense and patience. Ira's eyes didn't leave hers. I told him I'd ask. She looked out across the field where the cattle grazed, their shapes slow moving among the grass. Wouldn't be just reading and sums. These children, they'd come from ranches, from homesteads. Some might not know their own letters. I reckon that's true. She turned back to him. You think there's room for both, a life here and something like that? He stepped toward her, brushing dirt from her forearm with his thumb. I think this place is stronger because of you. Not smaller. Thea touched the edge of the basket. If I said yes, it wouldn't be most days. Twice a week, maybe. He said he'd set up benches in the back of his store for now. He nodded. Then we'll ride in together on those mornings. She searched his face, looking for even a flicker of hesitation. There was none. I'll write him back, she said. Inside, she rinsed her hands and pulled a sheet of paper from the drawer they kept near the stove. Her handwriting felt steadier than it had in months. She chose her words carefully, offering not just her willingness but her expectations: books, slates, proper ink, not scraps. Later that afternoon, Ira tapped the doorframe as he stepped into the kitchen, holding a small wooden box. Found this in the barn loft. Belonged to my mother. Thea set her mending aside. "What is it?" He placed it on the table and opened the lid. Inside lay a pair of spectacles, a thimble, and a folded linen handkerchief with faded embroidery. "She kept her sewing things in it," he said. "Thought maybe you could use it." Thea touched the handkerchief, the edge worn thin. "Did she make this?" "Yes, she embroidered in the winter when the chores slowed." Thea traced the stitched initials. "It's careful work. She didn't have much growing up." Her hands learned early to make things last. She folded the cloth again and set it back inside. "So did mine." He watched her longer than usual, then pulled a chair beside her. "You've made this place feel like something I never had before. A home that doesn't go quiet when the day ends." She rested her hand on his. "Ira, are you ever afraid it could go away?" He didn't look down. "I used to be, not now." That evening they stacked firewood in the lean-to behind the house. Thea carried the smaller pieces, Ira the split logs. The rhythm of it, the quiet thud of wood on wood, felt like its own kind of conversation. As the sun dipped low, they sat on the back steps, their boots dusted from the day. Ira passed her a tin cup of water. "I was thinking," he said. "Come winter, we could close in the back room. Make it a proper space for your books." She looked at him. "You want to build onto the house, not much, just enough so you have a place to work, maybe a shelf or two." She leaned her shoulder against his. "What made you think of that?" He tipped his cup toward the horizon. "You're staying." "So we build." A breeze rustled the dry grass. She set her cup down and laced her fingers through his. "I never thought I'd have a say in anything again," she said. "You do now," he replied. They sat until the stars crept overhead, not speaking, not needing to. When they rose, it was without hurry. They walked back inside together, the door closing behind them with the soft sound of something settled, and in the quiet that followed, there was no echo of old loneliness. Only the shared stillness of two people who had chosen and been chosen in return. Thea laid the last stitched border on the quilt and smoothed it across the bed, her thumb brushing the edge where the blue squares met the cream. She'd worked on it in quiet hours, after supper, or when the wind made riding impossible. Now, with autumn slipping close and the air growing crisp enough to see her breath in the mornings, it would be needed. Ira came in from the barn with the scent of hay and cold air clinging to his coat. He stood in the doorway, watching her tuck the corners beneath the mattress. "I didn't realize you'd finished it," he said. "I wanted it ready before the frost set in." He stepped closer, running his hand over the fabric. "It's good work, careful." She turned to face him. "I remember my mother made one like it the winter I turned 13. I used to trace the stitching with my finger when I couldn't sleep." Ira nodded, then sat down on the edge of the bed. "You never talk much about her." "She wasn't cruel," Thea said, settling beside him. "But she kept her heart pressed shut like a book nobody was allowed to open." "Grief did that to her." "What did she lose?" Thea folded her hands in her lap. "A sister. Fever took her before I was born. After that, I don't think my mother trusted Joy to stay." Ira was quiet for a moment, then he said, "You're not like her." "I used to be," Thea said. "Until I came here." Outside the window, the cottonwoods along the creek had turned yellow, their leaves flickering like candle flames. The wind carried the scent of wood smoke and the faintest trace of early snow on the peaks. Ira stood and picked up a short stack of lumber from the corner. "I've been working on those shelves for your books. Thought I'd put them up this week." She followed him into the back room, where the walls had been sealed with new planks and a small window added to catch the afternoon light. He set the boards against the wall and marked the studs with a pencil. "I've never had a place for my own things," she said. "A room that felt shaped for me." "It's not just yours," he said, fitting the first shelf into place. "It's ours." She stepped back, watching as he drove the nails clean and straight. "You're good with your hands," he glanced at her. "I've had time to learn." "Do you ever miss company?" she asked. "Besides me?" "There were years when the silence didn't bother me, but now I can't imagine this house without your voice in it." She came forward and stood beside him, pressing her hand to the wall. "It's a strange thing how quickly a life can shift." "Not strange," he said. "Just rare." By the time the last shelf was up, the light outside had faded and they sat on the floor, backs against the wall. Thea leaned into his side, his arm around her shoulders. "Ira," she said quietly, "you've given me more than I knew to hope for." He kissed the top of her head, his voice low. "You gave it to yourself, I just made room." That winter, the wind came down from the mountains in long howls and the fences froze hard into the ground. Thea rode with Ira on the days the snow wasn't too deep, and when it was, she stayed near the stove, writing out lesson plans for the children in Red Hill. Twice a week, they hitched the wagon and drove in together. The ride was quiet but not cold. It was the kind of silence that meant understanding. The children there came dusty and curious, some with hands rough from chores, others too shy to meet her eyes. Thea taught them not just letters but how to listen and ask. She brought books from a crate Ira had salvaged from town, and by spring, the shelves he'd built were nearly full. One evening, as the snow melted in slow rivulets down the hill, Thea stood in the doorway watching the stars blink through the last of the clouds. Ira came behind her, his hands resting at her waist. "Been thinking," he said. She tilted her head to listen. "I'd like to marry you. Not because you need it, but because I want to make it known that this is your home same as mine." She turned in his arms. "I want that, Ira. I want to stand beside you and for it to be named." They were married under the cottonwoods by the creek, the same ones that had turned gold the year before. A preacher came from Red Hill, and the children she taught brought wildflowers in their pockets. There was no music, but the wind through the branches sang enough. Later, they shared pie and coffee on the porch, the sun warming their joined hands. Years passed like seasons rolling over the land. Thea taught until new women came to settle, and then she trained them. She kept a shelf for her books and another for the letters she received from students gone now to other towns. Ira expanded the barn, took on a neighbor's cattle during a dry spell, and never stopped mending what broke. They built a life slow and solid, brick by brick, word by word. And in every room of the house, there was evidence of them. Her handwriting on a calendar, his boots by the door, the quilt she stitched years ago folded neatly at the foot of their bed. One evening, well into a spring that smelled of new grass and damp wood, Thea sat on the porch with Ira beside her, both of them watching the light fade over the hills. "Do you remember the day I arrived?" she asked. "I do. I was afraid I'd never be more than what I'd lost." He took her hand. "Now you're everything you built." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "And you're the one who saw me clear." "No," he said. "You saw yourself, I just didn't look away." The wind moved through the grass, and a barn owl called once from the cottonwoods. Thea closed her eyes, the warmth of his hand wrapped around hers. They had no need for more words. What they had was enough, and it lasted quiet, steady, and whole.